not its language. And this is actually why Islam is so important. I mean, it's obviously desperately important as a religion, but it's also important as having its major miracle, and the major deed of its prophet was trying to transmit a book in the Arabic language, and then for this book to be written down. And it was really having this written language that made people, if you like, coalesce. So, for example, people in Yemen would never have thought of themselves as Arabs in the dim and distant past. But over the centuries before Islam, they began to speak Arabic. And then they ended up with this amazing book, the Quran, which gave them a written and sort of fixed point of reference to their language and to their peoplehood. I don't really want to say nationhood or ethnicity or anything, but it's more than that, anything that made them into a group. And you can look back from the Quran and you can look forward and see what language does. And you can look, as I say, a long, long way back from the Quran to the beginnings of Arabic, several thousand years BC, probably up in the Fertile Crescent. Well, definitely up in the Fertile Crescent. But you can look at the way it spread around and how people began to identify themselves as Arabs, and it's really language that holds the whole thing together. And I just want to give you, I mustn't rabbit on too much about language because I'm a bit obsessed with it, but I want to give you an image that I borrowed from Al-Mas'udi, the great 9th, 10th century Arabic and Arab historian. And he said that writing history is like finding a load of gemstones of different shapes and colours and then arranging them in order to make a beautiful necklace. And that's really what I've tried to do. And to make your necklace, you have to have a string. And my string is language, because it's kind of the thread that runs through history more strongly than anything else, in my opinion.
So will you read from that early section? I mean, the early sections of the book that deal with High Arabic and Arabic poetry, and even before then, some of those inscriptions, I found that whole part of the book just gripping, because it was all so new. And it is a beautiful passage, this one, about Salam.
Yeah. Salam, or whoever he is, Salam. I'll come to it. I was trying to kind of listen to the very earliest voices that we have in Arabic, and this is what I found. Littered across the stony deserts of modern Syria, Jordan, and northern Saudi Arabia, where the Arabian Peninsula, is mortised into the Fertile Crescent. That is precisely in the area where the earliest Arabs roamed with their herds, according to the Syrian inscriptions and mentions in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Old Testament. In this area, there are scores of thousands of graffiti packed into the boulders that dot the landscape. The main script used is Nabatean, the precursor of Arabic script. The date is quite a lot later than those early Assyrian and biblical references to Arabs, probably from the end of the last millennium BC. But before the appearance of Nabatean in the final third of that millennium, the writers probably had no letters in which to express themselves. The language is not quite Arabic as we know it, but it's close. Closer perhaps than Anglo-Saxon is to English. Bending the linguistic taxonomy a little, it wouldn't be far out to say that these are our first authentic Arabic documents. Most of them are names, and most of the names have lineages. So it's like Kilroy, Kilroy was here, I was here. And it's just sort of A, son of B, son of C, son of D. Sometimes the lineages extend back an extraordinary 15 generations and more. I think the record is 17 generations. How many generations of your ancestors can you remember, Denise? How many can I remember? Not very many. Extraordinary, and in the cases where with luck and scholarly patience they can be cross-checked with other graffiti, the genealogies are consistent. The present-day equivalent would be to remember one's pedigree back to the time of Shakespeare or the Pilgrim Fathers. But the graffiti writers were not just walking family trees. There are everyday glimpses, such as that of a herdsman who, and I quote, spent the early spring on this plain and fed on truffles. Lucky man, come out. Truffles. And there are more poignant records like that of the guy you mentioned, Imam Salim, Salim, anything else, because we don't have vowels to help us read the names. And he says that he helped the goats bring forth their young, and so, Lat was the great goddess. Lat grant security, and he mourned for Man'il, his son, who had died distressed, overshadowed. The grief is audible even now. But there is fun too. Another informal epigrapher wrote that he was very lovesick for a maiden and had joyous sex with her. And there is wildry, as when graffiti writers add something rude, like graffiti writers do all over the place, to the inscriptions of their rivals. There are also plenty of scratched heads among the present-day interpreters of these ancestral voices. Does the verb adama, for instance, mean to moor, to finish? Graffiti being what they are, the context is often as minimal as the landscape, as the desert landscape they're in. What's perhaps most remarkable, however, is the social context and its continuity. Patterns of pastoral migration that can be teased out of the graffiti repeat themselves, not just in the past. So somebody writes 2,000 years ago, this is his camping place year after year. And you have to imagine him sitting there, bored out of his head, watching the camels. He's already pecked 20 camels onto the rock. And it seems that these people actually learned the letters as a sort of game. They weren't scribes or, immediate litterateurs. But it was like a game to pass the time, it seems. That's the only explanation. That guy wrote, this is his camping place year after year. And people have the same camping places now, 2,000 years later. So too do figures of speech continue. In one graffito, the writer records that a torrent made him flee in the season of Suhail, that is in late August, when the star Suhail or Comogus rises. In the same area, 2,000 years later, in the 20th century, the Ruala led with prominent wars. When Suhail's overhead, trust not the torrent bed. And there's another theme mentioned in words and prayers and shown in pictures, one that will repeat itself with catastrophic regularity, and which clearly played a part in both the culture and the economy, and that is raiding other people's herds. Herding and raiding took these people to the steplands. It kept them there, on the move, and ensured that they remained politically disunited. And the pattern all began long before these earliest authentic voices, before even the Assyrians and Genesis. And some people would say, the pattern repeats till today, herding and raiding.
True, true. And you described those guys, that it was a game, language was a game, or the inscript, the signs were a game. It's like they're fiddling with their phones. That's what they do now. They just pretty
Yeah. I mean, it seems there's one scholar has drawn a parallel with some of the I think they're like the Berber, Amazi tribes in North Africa who. They write Arabic and so on, but the herdsmen, they have a particular script that they write graffiti in. And it just seems to be a game. And it seems to be that's what these guys were doing. They didn't actually need to write.
Yeah, but it's, that quote, the first one about Salim, let's call him, it's so close to the bone. I mean, it was the first time I read it, I just felt for this man, millennia ago, and everything was in, work was in there, family was in there, love, loss, grief, it's all in there. It's just so relatable, and that's why I think those...
Yeah, and they're not mediated by... They're not mediated by historians. They're the actual voices, and it's like... it's the nearest you can get to listening to a tape recording or a digital recording of those voices at that time. And some people would disagree with me in calling them Arabic, and technically speaking, they're North Arabian. Well, without getting into the details, Arabic is a lot wider than the standard Arabic or the classical Arabic that you and I studied. My criterion is that if I can transcribe these graffiti into Arabic letters and show them to the kids and they can get an idea of what they're saying, then it's Arabic of a sort.
Yeah. You go on from there in the book, and we have to move on from language, sadly. But to talk about High Arabic and the poetry, in terms of its role in spreading the word and everything. But you describe it sort of as the archaeology of the desert. Or the Arabs, Pompeii or whatever, and that it has to be excavated because it's so rich and so telling of their history.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean, if you are obviously if you're a nomad, which the earliest Arabs seem to have been, it seemed to be a descriptive, one of their characteristics that they were nomads. I mean, you move around and you don't build things by and large, so you don't leave physical archaeological remains. And for that matter, we don't actually have any definite poetry before about the 6th century, but that is quite early. And the nice thing about Arabic poetry is that it's described in almost in architectural terms. So you have a bait is a line of poetry, and a bait, as you know, is a dwelling, either a house or a tent, and it has two shatrain, two halves, and I think it's there sometimes called misra'a, the two, which are the two panels of the doors open, and you have watted, egg, and all these various other terms that really go with houses used for poetry. So you can kind of archaeologize poetry.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting way of looking at it, and I really love the way you wrote those passages. We must move on, though, quickly. You said recently that you were very grateful to have been taught by Patricia Crone, who said at Oxford, that history doesn't have to be dry, that, of course, the writing matters, and, it's a shift of subject slightly, but moving from Arabic to English, I mean, your prose, your writing is just, it's a measure of the fact that this book, in spite of the 600 years, the 600 pages plus the 3 millennia and the contortions of history, that you've made it so incredibly readable and so much fun to read. And I was really interested when you said recently about Patricia Byrne and learning at Oxford that history doesn't have to be dry.
Yeah, I think going back to al-Mas'udi, it's that business of stringing the gems on the string. All right, you can't make it all gems. You can't make it all, astrologers and predictions, and you have to have the hard analysis. You have to have the marshalling of facts and the telling of the truth as you see it. But to intersperse it with illustrations from Arabic writers of history who lived very near the time, I think is perfectly justified. And if you read somebody like al-Mas'udi or al-Tabari or Ibn al-Athir, they're fantastic reads. And if you also read the kind of classic Arabic histories, they tend to go right back to the beginning. In my going back way before Islam, I'm not doing anything revolutionary. I'm only doing what the old Arabic writing historians did themselves, and they saw Islam as the central event of Arab history, as it is undeniably, it's the sort of it's the centerpiece of the necklace. It's the great pendant, beautiful pendant. But it goes back before as well as after, and the roots of Islam are deep in history, as is recognised by Muslim thinkers, of course. So in making my history interesting and going back so far and giving it this shape where it has 1400 something years before, 1400 something years after, I'm really taking my cue from Arabic writers of history, or writers of Arabic history, not all of whom are Arabs.
Did you have, this is an odd question now, was there somebody looking over your shoulder, a spirit guide, Ibn Khaldun or somebody? For the trilogy, the Ibn Battuta trilogy, you had Ibn Battuta very close by the whole time, but writing this history, was there somebody, any particular writer from the past that you felt, was there one that was with you along the way, or a whole crowd of people in the room?
Obviously you use so many sources, but certainly Ibn Khaldun, as kind of having found himself in a not dissimilar situation, and if you like, extracting history from the environment around him, or looking at history through the lens of the present. Al-Mas'udi, as I mentioned, yes, definitely. I had all these people on a sort of crowding around you there as well, looking over my shoulder and holding my writing up. You were a great support, as I said. But also, I'm not just being nice. You really were. These other people from the Arab past, particularly poets. And I think poets often say kinds of truths that other people do not say. It's why I often have my poetry translated in my book. It's why I kind of begin and end with Nizar Khalbani, the great late Syrian poet who lived very recently. And it's why I quote poetry throughout this book, because poetry works as journalism, poetry works as photography, poetry works as portraiture, poetry works as sound recording. Obviously poetry is Arabic poetry is written in a very high register. Classical Arabic poetry. But people tended to be reacting to what was happening around them, but with great immediacy. So, as a historian, I can go and look back at these sort of rushes of history, or this first draft of history. Today it's journalism, and I think in a lot of the Arab past, it's poetry that was the first draft of history. So I had a kind of cohort of poets crowding around me from.
Seems like it. We're beginning to run out of time.
Got it.
Yeah,
we've just started chatting. We're only scratching the surface.
Well, I know it's a big book. I don't know. I mean, I loved your next reading, especially the first paragraph of it about Syria. Can you maybe just give that short reading? Shorten it a bit, maybe, Guernica, on the.
Yeah.
Because it's such. For me, it also reflects your dazzling turn of phrase, as Ian Black calls it, which is a large part of the success of this book.
All right, I'm just seeking to shorten it a bit where I can. All right, yes, I can see how I can shorten it. Yeah. All right, so I talk a lot in this book about language. I talk a lot about unity and disunity, and how language is used to forge unity, but can also lead to disunity. So this is to do with a recent attempt to impose unity in Syria. About 20 years ago, I visited the Syrian city of Hama, a sleepy place on the Orontes River, interspersed with tangled orchards and with the groans and gull cries of giant wooden wheels that raise water from the deep river. I particularly wanted to find a venerable riverside mansion, Beit el-Kailani, that I had seen in an old photograph. The house had its own enormous water wheel, in Arabic, na'ura, and sometimes they're called noria, which is a kind of garden na'ura. The house had its own enormous water wheel attached and was wonderfully strange, half palazzo, half paddle steamer. But it had vanished. Its site in the